Hello and welcome to episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about overcoming negativity in your fab business. So this is something we all have to deal with, handling criticism, rejection, just general negativity from other people or yourself, of course. And we're going to share some stories with you about how we have dealt with it or not and just kind of be there for each other. So Kristen, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I actually think that negativity and criticism are rampant in the fashion, accessory, beauty world. And I think part of the reason that is because everyone thinks they can start a business. Everyone thinks they can do this. Everyone kind of thinks it's easy.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that to it. Also, something else that just sprung into my mind is that a lot of people in design who have had more of a formal design education, like we are raised to critique things. That's how we develop our artwork. So I think it's normal with your peers, especially in business, that you're going to be constantly critiquing everything that you and they are doing. And sometimes it can just get a bit much and you'd rather just like do your thing.
Yeah, well, and especially with the rise of social media, so many public figures and public works are accessible now, and that's a really great thing. But that also means that everyone thinks they have a right to share their opinion with the creator.
Well, and things like fashion and jewelry, we all wear those, so we all feel like we have a right to have an opinion, which we do, of course. And as consumers, we need to have an opinion, and our buyers, of course, need to have their opinion. But when you put your work out there, it can be quite difficult to take those opinions sometimes.
Definitely. So I actually think that starting and running your business, I think one of the hardest things and the biggest hurdle to continuing your business is criticism, and it is rejection, and it is disappointment, and how you deal with that can either make or break your business. I really think this is what it comes down to over talent and everything else.
Yeah, it's sticking it out, it's having patience, it's keep going when you have a disappointing sales day or a sales launch. And I think there are those rare cases where it just happens really quickly, but I think for most of us it's about being consistent and putting the work in and growing it organically, and that can take a while.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about overnight successes in a little bit. But Rachel, before I get into all of mine, what are some of your worst stories?
Well, I think the most recent one for me is probably the hardest thing I do at the trade shows, just because I'm not a naturally extroverted personality, even though I'm very comfortable around my friends and I like to meet new people. I do find it overwhelming being around a lot of strangers, especially when I have to answer a lot of questions and really be on the ball. And that is something that you have to do, and I've had to just kind of get over that and get on with it, because as an artist, if I don't sell my work, then I don't have a business. And part of selling is communicating and promoting yourself and your designs. And so I have to just kind of get on with it. But it can be very demotivating, especially when you sink a lot of money and invest, your time, your energy and your money into things like trade shows, which you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on, that you sit there and you feel like no one is really coming to your booth, or the booth opposite you is getting loads and loads of traffic. It can be very, very hard to watch. But I've actually used the times when I haven't had a very busy, a huge amount of foot traffic in my booth to really observe what other businesses are doing and to talk to the other attendees. And I often find that everyone is in the same boat. We all have like large amounts of time where nothing seems to be happening and we feel quite low. And then suddenly someone comes walking in from a brand that you really like or is really huge, and then they'll want you to come in and do a presentation and meeting, and it's suddenly like, oh, this was worth it. But you don't always get those like turnarounds happen until the last minute, Or my very first show, I didn't make any sales, and I didn't have any sales come from the leads at that show. And that was a huge disappointment because I put so much work in. Whereas now I'm seeing a return on my investment in trade shows, probably because I've learned from my mistakes from the first show. But yeah, it's still an ongoing learning curve, trying to stay positive when you're seeing your competition kind of like blossom in front of your eyes, especially if they're newer in the business than you. That can be quite harsh. But it's just part and parcel of being a business owner. You know, the stakes are all high. It's your business, so of course you're going to feel emotionally attached to everything that you're doing.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really interesting point because I consider myself to be an extrovert. And when people don't talk to me, that's really hard. Like, especially on social media, when I ask questions, when I'm like, how's everyone doing? Like, what are you making today? And like crickets. And that is actually, I had a really low point. I just remembered this because you said this in like November or December, and like no one was talking to me. I had like zero engagement and I was so sad. And someone pointed out that my sales were up and that more people were like working with me. They just weren't. And I was like, but they're not talking to me. And they were like, so what? Why do you care? And I was like, but I want people to talk to me.
Yeah, it's like for you, that's like a marker of success. It's like you want people's approval. Like everyone wants different things, but you know, it feels good when people talk to you about your or comment on your designs. Of course, that feels good.
But going back to some of my earlier um, problems, I actually had an editor for one of the magazines um, I was working with. After looking at my work, she was like, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen. You clearly have no idea what you're doing. And if it was up to me, I wouldn't even bother putting you in this issue." Like,
So harsh.
talk about demoralizing.
Yeah, that is really like I think that's borderline rude, actually. There are ways to, get across your point without kind of like
Yeah,
hammering the nail in.
I mean, I actually, I do think it's really rude. And actually, I went back and looked at what I sent her now that I have experience, now that I'm like, now that I
Mhm.
know what I'm doing, and it really wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that bad. But at the time, I was new, and so I didn't
Yeah.
realize
Mhm.
that she was out of line, but like she was like really out of line.
Yeah, and you look up to people who have more experience than you in an industry that's quite unknown. So that must have been really, put you
Yeah.
off the rails, really.
Yeah, it was really sad. And I mean, and along those same lines, I deal with a lot of personal rejection. Because I submit to different magazines, to different publication companies, and I submit a lot, I get rejected a lot. So like I get way more rejection emails than I do acceptance emails. And even within my own like family, like I'm really lucky if I show my designs to them, if they go, oh, like
Yeah,
that's a positive response.
yeah, I'm the only designer in my family. So I'm really lucky that my husband is a designer and he can, really appreciate my work. And obviously he's got a biased opinion, but it it's hard when your loved ones don't really understand your passion for something or really see the value in what you're doing.
Right, when they
Or that there's even like a market for it, to be quite honest.
yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing is especially because a lot of what I do is hand knitting, like people just don't understand that there's a market for that. And like it's really horrible when I'm explaining to someone what I do, and then I don't mind it anymore, and now I think it's kind of fun. But like at the beginning, people would go, oh, my mom does that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, it's not the same thing. No, she doesn't.
Yeah, I often have to explain how my industry works, and that's another thing at trade shows. We talk about this a lot, the attendees amongst ourselves, how there are a lot of people who come in who somehow get into this industry event when they have no idea what the industry is, and you kind of feel like you've wasted a lot of energy explaining to them all of your collection and everything, and then you can't be rude and outright ask them where they're from, but you start to suspect that they don't know anything about the industry, and then it turns out that they're just wandering through, and they don't realize that this is like a huge investment for you, and
I'm
they're wasting your time. And I would never do that, but I guess they just don't know.
I'm surprised they're even allowed in. Like, isn't there an entry
Yeah,
fee too?
yeah, people are vetted, but obviously people still get through. And I would love to know how and why they're there, and how they don't have anything better to do, but they do.
You know, and before we move on, like really quickly too, I think there is going back to kind of this personal. I mean, and that's the thing, is it's all kind of personal because this is
Mm-hmm.
your stuff. But
Yeah.
I have started releasing multiple patterns, hand knitting patterns each month, and some of them I really really love, and some of them I'm doing them for other people because I was asked.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's really kind of hard when the ones that I'm like, oh yeah, like I made something for like I designed something for my sister in December, and that is selling like crazy, and the one that I designed for me
Mm-hmm.
is not, and I'm like,
I have
mine's
very
better.
similar experiences. Yeah, it always turns out that the designs that I put like so much effort into and took so much longer, they aren't as well received as the ones that were really fast to make, and I don't feel that attached to. So it's funny how that happens. But yeah, of course, it's so personal when you're creating your own designs to sell.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and actually, I do work with the public a little bit, but this is part of the reason that I don't work with the public. And I actually, like, I mean, this really, I think this topic can apply so much more to people who like do work in the beauty industry, who do work at like with hair or with makeup, because you're dealing with the public, and if the public like who like you're dealing with the person and they're right there, and if they don't like it they will tell you
Yeah,
like right then, and half the time like you can't necessarily fix it, and like that's part of the reason that I always hesitate to I mean I do, but part of the reason that I hesitate to work with the public is because like you can have like very unhappy people and that you can't always fix it.
yeah. There's also something to be said for like fab businesses, fashion accessory beauty businesses. I do feel like we have it a little harder because the commentary is very real.
And very loud.
Yes.
Everyone has an opinion on it. I mean, and I understand like everyone wears clothes every single day. If you're a woman, you probably wear like some sort of makeup or jewelry or some sort of accessories.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, you have an opinion, you have your own style, but wow, do people think they can comment on it?
Yes, definitely. And I think it also, sadly, that fab businesses kind of fall under this like very female, stay at home mom kind of vibe. And those businesses, they're often looked down as something that's like a supplementary income. I mean, obviously, there are loads of men in fashion. Of course, I'm not discounting men in fashion, but I'm saying that startups from stay-at-home moms, there's definitely lower expectations for us, and that can be really frustrating because you get the sense that people think that because this is something fun that you enjoy, like fashion, that this isn't something serious. This isn't something that you have aspirations to support yourself and your family with.
And can we segue for like a few minutes, because this is actually a huge sticking point with me
Yeah.
is men in the fab world. And of course, they are totally welcome and I support them and whatever, like all of that. But oh my God, they're taken seriously from the get go. And not only are they taken seriously from the beginning, they make more money than women doing it. And not only that, but women heap praise upon them like no other. They're like, oh, a man is doing this. How amazing.
Yes.
And
I
I'm
think
like, yes, some of their work is amazing, but oh, just because you're a man and you can do something that's considered traditionally feminine does not mean that you are an amazing human being just for that reason.
well, and I've actually seen kind of like the in reverse actually. There's a trend for male sales reps at trade shows, and I think it's very smart because they're, you know, young, attractive men, and the buyers are often middle-aged women. And so, of course,
Mhm.
this is a great combination because they would love to talk to some young, hot guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's, you know,
Maybe that's why the men are fawned over, is because they are usually attractive and they
yeah,
are
and
usually
because
younger.
there aren't as many of them. So when they're there, it's like, ooh, you know, there's usually like one or two guys in the fashion group. So it's like, oh, who are these people?
Yeah, and that drives me crazy because I mean, just okay, and again, I'm not saying they should be discounted and they should be, like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying your work as a woman is just as valuable. Like we're
Yes,
kind of doing this to ourselves, lady.
yeah, no, equality.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. And like and I do follow some knits, like some male knitters, and their work is great and that's why I follow them. But at the same time, I see how much women like fall over themselves to compliment them. And I'm like, do you need to do that? Do you do that to anybody else? And sometimes, yeah, there are sort of, you know, celebrities in the knitting world, in any world, any sort of world. But like, hmm. I and you know, I've gone to parties too where there's just like I remember going to, oh, I'm not going to say it because it'll, you'll know who I'm talking about if you're in that community. I have gone to um, industry related parties and there will be like one or two or three men in the room of like 50 women, and everyone creates these circles around these men because they just want to like listen to their like, tell me more. And I'm like, I get the, you know, like this is someone who you admire, but like, yeah, like you deserve that attention too.
Do you think it's this stereotype that men are better at business than women, and so the women think that there's something to be learned from these men because they must be, you know, the breadwinner in their family, and so what is it that they're doing to make their business successful? Like, even if it's like subconscious.
I don't know. I think it's a subconscious thing that kind of similar but different. I think it's a subconscious thing that we look down on our own work because it is fashion, because it is considered silly, because, you know, our little, you know, 7-year-old cousin is considered a fashionista and she probably looks great, but like it's considered something that all women do. It's not really that big of a deal. And so if a man does it, it's validating. And I think that subconsciously is what is happening.
Yeah, and it's the whole like, oh, this is what I do. I draw for a living, and then oh my, yeah, my niece loves to draw fashion
Right.
models. And you're like,
Right.
well, it's not really the same thing.
Right. Right. And like,
Because there's so much more to it than just drawing. Like, it has to be a good drawing. There has to be a business model. There has to be marketing, and you have to have client acquisition. So it's a completely different thing.
right. And you have to have like marketing and you have to have finance knowledge. Like there's so much more that goes into it, and not to discount children or men because of course they can do these things potentially better than us, depending on who it is. But like, yeah, I think it is very much, for whatever the reason, plays into a lot of the subconscious insecurities that we have as women.
Mhm.
But yeah, going back to what we were originally saying, I think part of the reason people don't take it seriously is because this just isn't a viable career option in most of the world. And luckily, we have the internet now, and we can work from home, and we can, you know, work with companies all over the world. But then I think that also, so not only are we working in sort of this fab industry, and that can cause a lot of um, you know, criticism and unwanted attention. But also now then you are a small business owner, and and you have all of the comments about how, like, most small businesses fail, and can you really do this, and are you really, like, so you have all of that going on too, which sort of leads me into now, since we are on the internet and we do have all of this coming into play, let's talk about those overnight successes, because a lot of people are like, oh, haven't you been doing that for a month? How's business going? How's that
Yes.
going?
I think most people who haven't ran their own business expect a business to be profitable within the first month of you running it.
Right.
And there are some business models where you can get some bookings and then you're making a profit from day one, and that is great. I salute you for doing that. But my business model is a slow growth at the beginning, but then it's going to bring me in the big bucks in the future. And when I say my business model, I can't take the credit. This is textile industry has been going for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I want something that's sustainable, and I'm gonna, make sure that I'm making a profit and that I'm going to be in it for the long run and not burn out.
Rachel, that sounds amazing, but I'm going to take a second here and say that even though this is a very smart plan, and it's what I'm doing too, seeing people who blow up overnight really sucks.
Oh yes, of course I compare myself to others, and of course I'm jealous when I see other people who have a different business model, or maybe they have the same business model, they're just finding success in areas that I'm not, faster than I am.
Yeah.
It's definitely demoralizing, especially when you're in a public space like at a trade show and you're seeing newbies who are making sales at like 10 a.m. and you haven't even had someone to sit down yet. Absolutely, that is something that I feel and have to deal with.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this, like what makes an overnight success, because obviously we all want to be overnight successes,
Yeah,
but the thing with overnight successes is that typically the overnight, you don't really see all of the work that went into it. The people who are overnight successes have been working, maybe not doing exactly what they're doing, but they have been working. They have a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill. That is what enables them to go into some sort of overnight success type situation.
Yeah, and you don't know how long they've been working on something, so
Right.
it might seem like it's an overnight success, but then maybe they've been working on stockpiling blog posts, maybe they've been following up with people and just not taking it public yet.
Right. I think also what goes into that is a lot of determination and persistence.
Oh yes.
Because I mean, when I think about people that I know that are really succeeding as freelancers or as small business owners, they're the ones that stuck with it. I remember like even 10 years ago, the people that I was like freelancing with, and I've changed industries quite a few times, but the people who haven't are like killing it now.
Yeah, I think persistence, patience is really important. And I could have, my first trade show, I could have been like, well, this was all for nothing. No one cares. My work obviously isn't as good as everyone around me says it is. So this is like dead in the water. But I kept going. And then the next show, I got my first few clients, and then it's built and built and built. And now I have large accounts. So you just have to stick it out, really, even when it feels really hard.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Everyone, if this is something that you want, if this is something that you see yourself doing, you have to stick it out. Because I think the biggest key for being, an overnight success, quote unquote, is timing and
luck.
Because you can't really have timing and luck if you don't have that determination and if you don't have that skill set. Like I knew someone who was kind of an overnight sensation in the knitwear design world. And when she told me, she kind of like jumped on a trend before it was a trend. Like you kind of like, you could see it was coming, but she was like the first person that really kind of did it. And she kind of blew up overnight. but the reason she was able to do that, the reason she was still able to be an overnight success was because, you know, she had all of this background in clothing, in costuming, in design.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been in school for years. She'd been doing, so she happened to switch to knitting at that point in time, but she still had all of this background. And it was just like total like luck that, you know, that she blew up like that.
Yeah. I think, you know, most of us aren't overnight successes. And so if you're at the beginning of your journey and you're looking around you and you feel like everyone else has kind of made it, or they made it much faster than you, it's not for everyone. And also, you know, if you want to have a work-life balance, if you want to have, you know, time with your kids or whatever it is you want to do, you know, you make sacrifices. And the people who are overnight successes, they probably are putting in a lot more time than you're willing to admit that you're putting in.
Right. Not, yeah. And I mean time like years. Not only just like how much time are you putting in each day, but like time is in, you know, weeks and months and years of people dedicating themselves to maybe not necessarily this one particular thing, but to the craft as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into dealing with all of this, because all of these things can like really get you down if you let them.
Yes. So dealing with criticism, fun times, fun times. I had my first taste of this with my textile design business when I was going to a lot of meetups, because it was in every business book that I was reading saying, go to meetups, meet people in the industry. And that's a great idea, except that I wasn't meeting people in my industry. Because I was living in a very rural, non-fab city, which, by the way, episode 1, we cover that completely. Go into the archives and have a look.
Yeah.
So I was going to meetups and putting a lot of time and energy into meetups, and there was nobody there who was in my industry or a potential buyer. Yeah, of course, there could be, you know, a third connection who maybe worked in the industry, but it was a long shot. And actually what I found was just a lot of constructive criticism about how I was presenting my business. And I had put a lot of thought into things like my logo, my website, my branding, and had really thought it through. And then I was having people who had very little, I'm going to say no experience in fashion, telling me that I should change things on my business card. I had someone actually take one of my promotional postcards and start drawing all over it how I should change it. Granted, she had done some graphic design, but nothing for my industry. And I felt really attacked, and I couldn't quite articulate in the moment why I had made those decisions, and I felt really deflated and upset. But then when I came home and I thought about it, I was, you know, pretty confident that the decisions that I'd made were the right ones, and I didn't change anything that had been suggested. And I have had really positive feedback since then from people within my industry. So this was specifically the design on my business card. Someone told me that it shouldn't be a girl in a leather jacket because I didn't sell leather jackets, so that was misleading. When my whole thought process was I wanted to be like a disruptor, I wanted to be young and cool, and that was not really prevalent in the industry at that point. And so since then I have had people say like, oh, this is great, this is so fresh and new, and that's exactly what I was going for. No one ever said to me, oh, I assumed you sold leather goods. But, you know, hearing things like that can really get you down. And of course, you should be able to take criticism. I've also had some criticism that's been really, really helpful and that I've used. And, you know, you should listen to people and you know, especially when they are in your industry, absolutely listen to them and take into consideration what they're saying. But yeah, I found that really, really hard. But it also taught me to kind of take things with a pinch of salt and just grow a thicker skin when it comes to business, because everyone's going to have an opinion. And if you've put a lot of thought into your designs, then you can back it up. And you shouldn't have to prove yourself to people all the time, but you should also think about, kind of preempt it. Well, if someone does question this design, what can I say? What are the strong points of this design? What is it? Maybe it's lacking in this area, but what can I provide in another area of my business?
Yeah, that's all really great. And I think part of what is really needed when you deal with criticism is learning to respond and not react. When I heard from that editor who was so rude and told me that my designs were not that great, or my work wasn't, great, I could have gotten upset, and I could have, just stopped, or I could have reacted very terribly and emailed her back and said, "How dare you?" But instead, what I did was I emailed her and I said, "Listen, I'm really sorry. I am new. Like, what resources do you recommend? Because you clearly know more than I do." And she actually helped me after that. She helped me a lot. She was like, and she even apologized for it. And she's like, but she gave me quite a few very good resources that I still use to this day. And I think learning to respond to criticism is super important. And, another thing that you should do is really ask for support when you need it. Going back to my family, who is not that supportive, it's not like they try, but they're not what I want. And so I actually tell them what I want. I go, "I'm going to show you this thing that I made, and I want you to tell me how great it is." And so they do. They're like, "Oh, it's great." And I'm like, "Thank you. It is really great." I did that with my ex too. The guy that I was with in New York, he was so great. I loved it. Every time I made something, um, he would say, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is the best thing you've made yet."
Yeah.
And, I didn't care if it was true or not. I need, because I'm already ripping it apart in my mind. I'm already criticizing it and thinking how I'm going to make the next one better. I don't need someone else doing that. And that's one of the things. Okay, so that leads me into my next suggestion, because I had, like, all in a row, like last year at some point, a couple of my designs came out, and I remember looking at them and being like, "Yeah, this is good, but I would change this."
Mm-hmm.
And then I had someone I was dating tell me that. He was like, "Oh, this is really great, but you should consider changing that." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." And then someone did a review on, like, a website of this magazine, and she said something very similar. And I was like, "You know what? This is really great. Can you people stop telling me what to change? Like, why can't you focus on the positive?" And I realized I'm not focusing on the positive. I'm criticizing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I criticize all of my work, that really opens it up to criticism from other people. And not only that, but not only does it open it up to criticism from other people, but I'm actually internalizing that criticism because it's validating what I'm telling myself. And so now when you hear me talk about my work, I always go, "This is really great because this is why I love it." And I'm not saying it's perfect. It's not. If I sat and waited until something was perfect, I would never get anything done. But I have to, like, I can't criticize myself anymore. It's just not, it's not allowed.
I think you have to really believe in your designs or your services, your whatever your product is. You have to really believe that it is good for you to successfully promote it. And so I think, you should critique, and you should be open to other people's criticisms. But if you feel happy with the design, then you should go full steam ahead and promote it, because as long as you feel that what you're offering is the best version of what you had in your mind, then you can be successful in your promotion of your product.
Right. I definitely, like, I'm not saying There's no criticism ever, ever, ever. Well, criticism in a negative way. And actually, that's one of the things. So I do get rejected a lot. A lot of my designs get rejected because I send out so many,
Mhm.
right? And so when things get rejected, I actually take that time to be like, well, is this a bad design? Can I improve this design? Is there something with the yarn? Is there something with, like what's going on here and how can I make this better? And sometimes um, what I like to do is I'll look at the issue when it comes out and I'm like, well, why wasn't my piece included? And sometimes, I do need to make improvements. Um, and my work isn't up to par with the issue that they put out. And that's a really great learning experience. But sometimes, half the time, well, I was rejected because my piece just didn't fit in because it's not um, the same style. Like there's this magazine that I'm dying to get into and I get rejected every single issue. And every single time that the issue comes out, I look through it and I'm like, why do I want to be in this magazine? Their stuff does not, like, we don't have the same style at all. It's totally different. My stuff would not work in there at all. I totally see why I'm getting rejected. And I don't want to make what they print, like I don't, but for some reason, like I still try. I still want to be in that magazine. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if that's one of your goals and you can't let it rest, then just design something specifically for that magazine and don't include it in your collection.
Okay, but the thing is like I don't like it's just really ugly and I don't want to make it.
Is this one of the bigger, more celebrated magazines within your
Yes.
industry?
It's
That's probably
very
what
celebrated.
that's what it is. You want that recognition.
Right, right. Actually, okay, and that's a really great point because when you know like what that's exactly it. Like what do you want here? What is the main goal? And I do want that recognition and I do want, so how can I get that? Like that should be my goal. My goal shouldn't necessarily be to be in that magazine. My goal should be how can I get more acclaim and more focus on me and my designs.
Yeah.
I think the biggest realization for me was learning how much doubt I had. And I feel like I'm a very confident person in general, but I do have a lot of doubt, and doubt is really tied into that. And working on confidence and working on really believing in yourself 100% because you are the only person at the end of the day who's going to be there for you. And um, that is the most important thing. And so you really have to be on board with what you're doing in order for this to work.
Yeah. I feel like the most important thing that I've learned is to be consistent, not just with social media and, events that I attend, but also just to really keep designing, keep marketing, just keep going. Even when you feel like no one was listening, I kept going, kept going. And then that's when the big account walks into your life and everything's all set up and they look back in your history and they can see that you've been doing this and you're doing the right thing in all the right places. And that's when it pays off.
Yeah, experience is like you just like it's that persistence thing. Like that's really, and then like that's really what you need. And then you do like things when things happen, and you have to be ready for it. And you can't, you like, you're probably like, you really like going back to like that overnight success thing. Like you really don't want to be an overnight success because you're not ready for it.
Yeah, you're not ready, and also the whole thing about consistency is it really feeds into that know, trust, like factor. And especially in my industry where brands have accounts, they are used to working with a set amount of studios, and all the communication lines are open. They trust those people, they know them, they feel comfortable emailing back and forth. And even if your designs are fresher or more interesting, you've still got to kind of get in there and prove, well, I'm going to be super reliable. I'm going to give you great deals. I'm going to have great customer service. Like just having good designs isn't enough. And the more people see you, the more they associate, reliability with your brand.
Right. You really need that confidence in yourself so that other people believe in you as well. And you also have to be careful not to get too cocky about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, we all know those people. But
Yeah, it's about getting a balance. It's like not getting too dragged down by all of the constant critique around you, but also, yeah, not becoming overconfident and annoying.
yeah, I think, and another really quick tip that I love to do is I love to count my successes because it reminds me how far I've come. Like if I look at like yesterday, I sold a pattern and I made like $6. And like if I was like, oh, it's just $6, it's not really a big deal. I can't really live on that. What kind of business am I running here? Like, that's a really horrible way of looking at it. But if I count my successes and I'm like, oh, I sold a pattern and this time last year I didn't sell anything. And maybe tomorrow I'll sell 2, or maybe tomorrow I'll sell 10. Like when you start to count your wins, and let's say you don't have any wins, let's say you're getting started and you don't have anything, you know what? Go through and look at what you did accomplish, even if it has nothing to do with your business. Getting into that mindset of I am successful and the people around me love me and support me and want me to succeed and I want me to succeed. Like focusing on how great your life is what's really going to really bolster all of this and give you the motivation to keep going.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're going to stick at this in the long run, which we both advocate, you have to keep your mental health like functioning, and you have to keep positive, and you have to really see it as a business. These aren't friends that you're going out to meet for coffee. They're not always going to tell you that everything's going to be fine and everything's great. You really have to grow a thicker skin so that you can move forward in your business.
Right. Yes. Grow a thicker skin, but keep your sweet personality.
Oh,
That's the key.
yes. I think we've done a very good job of that.
I think so too. All right. So I think that's it for this week. We would love to hear your thoughts, and we'll um, be updating social media this week. Check our Facebook page, check our Instagram page, Fab Entrepreneurs at both, with different thoughts and tips on this. But yeah, we would love to hear from you guys on this topic and how you deal with it. And we will see you next week, next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We are talking about showing your fab products to the world, whether that's in a trade show, in a store, in a salon, however you do it. That's how we're talking about getting it out there into the world. So we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.